Friends, it's time for all of us to discuss the format of the resume. In other words, the content of the resume, what all information to include and how these information have to be mentioned, how to make your resume look very impressive, which can create the first best impression in the employer's mind. Let's discuss all these information in the video. Let's get started. The first section, what we have here, my dear friends, as you can see on the screen, is actually called personal details section. So what information are you supposed to mention under personal details? Starting with your name, followed by your address and your contact details, like your email ID and phone number. As you can see here on the screen, Praveen Kumar Rathod N, which is the name of the candidate who's applying for the job, followed by the address from door number to pin code. Everything is mentioned over here. Right below that, you can see email ID mentioned. When it comes to email ID, my dear friends, only one thing what I would like to say is, if you do not have a professional email ID, please create one and then mention the same in the resume. If you have the question, ma'am, what do you mean by professional email ID? I just have one email ID. I don't know what you're talking about. Very simple. If your email ID is such as desigirl143@gmail.com or naughtyboy123@yahoo.co.in, then I would definitely not suggest you to mention these kind of email IDs in your resume. First of all, it's a resume. All the information, whatever I'm going to mention in the resume, has to be professional. I cannot mention any funky email IDs like this, which might create a very bad impression about me by mentioning the same. So what is a professional email ID? Any email ID which starts with your first name, maybe followed by your year of birth, followed by any other logical numbers, anything which would go with your first name very well, is usually considered as your professional email ID. So what I would suggest you is to bring in that bifurcation in terms of receiving the personal emails and professional emails. It's always good to have a separate personal email ID and a separate professional email ID. That will always help you. Otherwise, your professional email ID can actually be overloaded with a lot of unnecessary mails, which can cause you to miss out something very important to what you should have clicked and checked. That's the reason it's always good to create a professional email ID. So make sure that you are actually mentioning a professional email ID without fail. Followed by your mobile number for sure. If there is any alternate contact number, by any chance, if your number is not reachable, your number is switched off, or your number is actually has no network, has some network issues, etc., then it's always good to mention alternate contact number so that the concerned person can get in touch with the concerned person whose mobile number you have mentioned as an alternate contact number, and actually can keep you informed what exactly they have to tell you. Okay, this is always going to keep you on a safer side. So please make sure that you mention an alternate contact number. Last but definitely not all the least, date of birth. Even private jobs nowadays do come with age restriction. There are a lot of job description mails I've been through where very clearly it is mentioned candidates below 27 years only. If you are older than 27 years, you're not supposed to, first of all, apply for the job at all. That is one common sense. By the time you finish engineering or MBA graduation, you will at least be of 24 years young or max 25 years young. It cannot be beyond that. Okay. By any chance, if you are a candidate, you are applying for a job, the age restriction has not been mentioned in the mail and you're applying for, and you have had gaps in between. Maybe after SSLC, you had 2 years gap. And then after PUC, again, you had 1 year gap due to your own personal reasons. It's always good to mention your date of birth. If you are a fresh engineering or MBA or BA, BCom, BSc graduate, then it is always a good idea not to mention because it is understood. If you're a fresh engineering graduate without any study gaps in between, then you cannot be more than 25 years young. So this is personal details section, my dear friends. Apart from this, mentioning any other information is not required. And some people even commit the mistake. They would go to the end of the resume and then open another section called personal details, and then they mention they will mention their name, their father's name, the passport number. All these not needed. A big no-no. The next section what we have to discuss is career objective. Before I could show you some examples of how career objective should look like, please understand what is career objective is all about. Career objective is a section where you're letting the employer know what kind of a job you're looking for as a candidate. When I say what kind of a job, am I talking about your list of demands as a fresher? No. I'm talking about, are you sure about which industry you want to get into, which department of which industry, any specific designation you have in your mind, etc., etc. Unless you have a clarity on that, you wouldn't be able to do justice to the job you would get into. That's why this is one section where you are actually letting the person know this is what I'm looking for. However, people make a very, very big mess out of this. I would like to show you some examples to justify what I have been actually talking about. Please have a look at the two sample career objectives, what you can see on the screen. To work in an organization where culture of freedom and working for initiatives is ensured, facilitating my contribution through thoughts and action to the company's vision and thus achieve self-development by playing a significant role in building the organization. Wow, it sounds very profound, but I didn't understand anything at all. Forget about I understanding something. The person who must have mentioned this in the resume also must have not understood anything. To be very honest, my dear friends, according to one of the researches conducted very recently, 90% of time, freshers who apply for jobs, the only thing what they do in career objective section is they either do copy paste or they do cut paste. This is the truth. You have no idea what a career objective is all about. You might not even have any objective for your career too, but you just want to do fill in the blanks. You have that section called career objective in your resume and you just write anything left, right, and center, or you would just easily copy and paste from one or the other resume. You have to understand, my dear friends, just read something like this. What if the person who's going to conduct the interview looks at this section called culture of freedom and asks you, okay, you mentioned culture of freedom and working for initiatives. What exactly do you mean by that? If this is a question asked by the interviewer, would you be able to do the justice in terms of answering to this question? When you are a fresher, you haven't worked for any organization of any industry in any designation, how would you even be able to talk about culture of freedom when you haven't experienced anything at all? Even experienced people can tumble here in this section. Then where is the question of you justifying this? I hope I'm making a lot of sense over here. So instead of digging your own graves, coming up with Anaconda part 1, part 2, part 3 kind of career objectives and using all jargons, it's always good to come up with something very simple and elegant. You might ask this question saying, ma'am, our interviewer is going to ask these kind of questions too? Yes. Your resume itself is the biggest question paper for your interviewer. If you think every recruiter has a list of questions, same questions will be asked to all the candidates left, right, and center, you are absolutely wrong. When it comes to a recruiter, the recruiter will be very spontaneous in terms of understanding the information what you have mentioned in your resume and can ask any question to check your confidence, to check whether whatever you have mentioned in the resume is making sense or not. However, one terms and conditions apply, my dear friends. If you are a person who has been an extraordinary candidate, you know what you're talking about, you can justify every word what you have written in the career objective. I'm not here to stop you from mentioning any of these kind of vocabulary or terminologies at all in your career objective. If you think you're very confident, go ahead. If you think that no, I do not have any answer, it's better to either not to write career objective or come up with something very simple and elegant. For example, look at this. Seeking employment with a company where my talents and skills could be utilized for the growth and expansion of the organization. To a certain extent, you can justify this. My favorite one is the second one, that is looking for an entry-level job in the field of software in a company of repute. How simple and elegant it is. You're just letting the person know in what industry are you looking for a job, any specific department of the industry you're looking at, and any reputed company. Every company, wherever you would apply for a job, is actually considered a reputed company. Every company has its own level of reputation, right? This is going to keep you on a very safer side. Stick on to something very simple like this than coming up with something too complex. In fact, that's what you can even see in the model resume, what I'm actually showing it to you in this video. A job that is apt to express my professional skills and training skills in the field of software in a company of repute. Very simple, no problem at all. Now let's go to education qualification section. Few things before we could actually talk about the education qualification section. Point number one, your education qualification information should be always written in anti-chronological order. Point number two, it's always good to use a table format to highlight different sections of your education qualification, like how you can see on the screen right now. There's a column called course, there's a column called institution, and there's one called university or board, year of passing, percentage, or CGPA. See, in most of the jobs, what you might apply, especially in IT software industries, they're very particular about percentage in each of these courses. For example, when we talk about Infosys is very, very particular about engineers scoring minimum 60% in SSLC, that is in class 10, minimum 70% in POC, that is in class 12, and minimum 60% again in engineering. To highlight that, it's always good to use a table format. Now just look at education qualification table. It's very convenient for any recruiter. If I'm a recruiter who is just interested to look at how much you've scored, I will just look at this section. If I'm interested to know where you have studied, then I will look at this particular section. If I'm very interested to know which year did you complete a particular course, then I would look at this particular column. So it makes it very easy for the recruiter to go through a certain set of information, what he or she wants to go through. Most important reason, my dear friends, here, this is extremely space saving. When you mention everything in the form of sentences, point number one, the person who would go through your resume has to read every word, every sentence. Point number two, it will consume a lot of space, more than the space you must have used to come up with the table format. So it's always good to go with the table format for educational qualification. So friends, that's all I've got for all of you in this video. I'm going to be back very soon with another video with lots of learning. Until then, please do take a great care of yourself and have an amazing time ahead. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching the video.